Interlude. The class of the first true dawn. The town's school graduates its seniors each spring on the hill, inside the old dry stone ring, and in the 30th year the graduating class asked me to give the address. And I said what old men say, that they should ask someone who remembered the history instead of someone who had been told it. And the class sent back, through my own daughter, who taught them civics, and clearly also rhetoric, a reply that left me no exit. That's why we're asking. We don't remember it either. You're the only elder who knows what it's like to inherit this world secondhand. We don't want a witness. We want the other thing. Whatever you are. So I gave the address, and Maya kept the text, and she rules it goes in the book, over my objection that a commencement speech is the lowest form of literature. Her pencil, in the margin. It's the only chapter addressed to the people who'll actually run the world the book is for. Everything else is addressed to keepers and gods. This one's for the heirs. It stays. It stays. Here it is, close to verbatim, the speech to the class of the first true dawn, 41 children of the world that stayed, none of whom had ever once heard the choir. I am told I saved the world, and I believe it the way you believe it, because trustworthy people keep saying so. You and I are, in that way, the same generation, the generation of the second hand, and that is the only credential I bring today, so let me spend it. Here is the thing nobody tells you about inheriting a saved world. You will spend your whole life among monuments to a war you cannot feel. You have eaten at the long table since before you could talk. You have sung the litany. You know the stories, the protein bar, the glasses, the 91 minutes, the way you know the shapes of your own hands. And some night, I promise you, it will all go suddenly strange, and you will think the thought every second-hand generation thinks, and feel the shame of it, and tell no one. The thought is, what if it's just stories? What if the whole architecture of our lives, the names, the chairs, the desk with the question over the door, is a beautiful habit nobody remembers the reason for? You will look at the watch your elders keep, and you will be unable to feel the thing it watches against. Because we built this world precisely so you would never feel it, and the not feeling is the victory. And the victory has a side effect, and the side effect is you, standing in the dark, wondering if any of it was real. I am here to tell you what to do on that night, and I am the only one who can, because I have stood in it longer than anyone alive. Every story you inherited secondhand, I inherited secondhand too, including the ones I am in. I gave the memories away before you were born. The man on the bus roof, the man at the scale, the man in the smoothing room. I know him exactly as well as you do. I have spent 30 years checking whether a life built entirely on told stories can hold a person's weight. Finding, it holds, but not the way you think, and the way it actually holds is my whole speech, so attend, as an old friend of mine says. It does not hold by belief. On the bad nights you cannot make yourself believe the stories harder, and you should stop trying. Belief summoned by force is just fear in a choir robe. It holds by practice. When the stories went strange on me, and they did, year on year, as the forgetting took the second life too, what held was never the grand narrative. It was the grooves, the hands that knew the shape of scratching a beak, the reflex that pulls out a chair for the difficult ones before the difficulty registers. The habit, and it is only a habit, and that is the secret. The habit is the whole cathedral, of learning one true thing about a person before deciding what they are. I could doubt every story in the book on a bad midnight. I have. I have doubted the choir, the loops, my own name on the spine. I have never once, at the same midnight, been able to doubt what my hands do, because the hands aren't a story. The hands are evidence, the only kind that survives every forgetting. Somebody trained them, over years, in love-shaped work, and the training is in me, present tense, checkable, mine. So here is the inheritance, class of the first true dawn, in the form you can actually bank. Not the stories, keep them, tell them, but they are the map, not the ground. The ground is the practices, and the practices do not require your belief. They require your hands. Learn the names. Pull up the chairs. Keep the files open. Say it out loud. Your grief, your gladness, your doubt itself. Doubt said out loud at a table is just another thing the table can hold. And doubt sealed in a skull is how the other thing started. Ask your history teacher. He was there. And on the night the whole thing goes strange and you cannot feel the war under the monuments. That night, do not go looking for the feeling. Go do one practice, any of them. Walk to one door, learn one name, set one place. The feeling follows the hands, not the other way around. That is the deepest engineering fact I know, and I learned it empty, which is how I know it doesn't run on memory. You are not the keepers of a story. Stories keep themselves. We have a whole library on it. The marginalia alone will outlive us all. You are the keepers of a practice, and a practice is the only thing in the worlds that is simultaneously so fragile it dies in one unpracticed generation, and so strong it once walked into the room where the universe forgets and made it remember. There is no third state for it. It is never preserved. It is only ever being done, or dying. Which means, and here is the terrifying, magnificent fact of you. The fact your elders are too fond of you to say at sufficient volume, so I will say it at the volume the hill allows. Every single morning of your lives, all of you, every one, the whole thing is yours to drop. Nobody before this generation could drop it. We were held to it by the dead. We had seen the cost. Our hands shook too much to let go. Yours don't. Yours are the first steady hands, the first free ones, and so yours is the first generation that will keep the watch, if it keeps it, for the only reason that was ever going to last. Not because you remember the dark. Because you looked at what your hands were trained to do, in the light, freely, on your own evidence, and found it good, and kept doing it. That's the whole address. That's the whole war, and the whole peace, and the whole of what an empty old man knows. The practice is in your hands. The dawn is, for the first time in 407 worlds, genuinely yours. Be loud. You're allowed. Some people went to a great deal of trouble. The Atlas of Saved Worlds, the youngest keeper. The core debated for a year whether the world called Lear should have a public page at all, and resolved it the way the New Age resolves the questions it cannot resolve, by asking the person most concerned when she was old enough to be asked. And she ruled, at 20, with the directness the whole atlas knows her for. Print it. All of it. Somewhere out there is a world where it's happening again, and the adults of that world are going to need to know what mine got right and what it got wrong. And my embarrassment is not a load-bearing consideration. Also, I was 4. Whatever dignity I'm protecting predates my ability to use a spoon correctly. The keeper of Lear was 4 years old. The loop seats itself in the strongest grip on the planet, the soul that cannot let go, and the core's theorists had always quietly assumed a floor on the candidate pool. Grip of that order, surely, takes a lifetime to grow. Dorai of Sen was 81. The keepers skew old, or wounded, or both. The grip is scar tissue. That was the doctrine. And then the hunger came to Lear, and the dawn began to reset, and the loop surveyed a world of grown grips. Soldiers, mothers, monks, the bereaved of a recent plague, candidates beyond counting, and seated itself in Pell, age 4, of a fishing town on the southern coast, and the Corps' arrival team spent its first week simply confirming the reading, because nobody could believe it, and the diagnostics came back identical every time, and Cass, consulted across the crossings, reviewed the data, and sent back the finding that reorganized the theory of the grip forever.
You assumed grip is scar tissue, attachment toughened by loss. Look again, at the instrument. The loop seats in the soul that cannot let go. Adults cannot let go because of what losing has taught them. A 4-year-old cannot let go because letting go has not been invented yet. You are not looking at the weakest grip on Lear. You are looking at the only one with no release mechanism installed. Her teddy bear, her mother, the boat, the morning. She holds them all with the full, undivided, unnegotiated grip of a person who has never once conceded that anything could be otherwise. We grow out of that grip. We call growing out of it maturity. The loop calls it attenuation, apparently. And on Lear, it went straight past every scarred adult to the one soul still holding the world, the way the universe holds information. Totally. Without a clause for surrender. The keepers skew old because old grips are common. The strongest grip was always going to be young. We just never wanted to look.
What does a world do with a 4-year-old who wakes each dawn remembering yesterday's apocalypse, who is, functionally, the only veteran on the planet, accumulating subjective years of repeated catastrophe inside a 4-year-old's instrument for carrying them? Lear got one thing wrong first, and the page records it because Pell insisted they tried to use her. Gently, desperately, with full anguish. The war was real. She was the only window into it. And so the adults of the southern coast did the thing adults do with an asset. Debriefed her, loop after loop, structured her irreplaceable knowledge, built strategy from a child's reports. And the reports got worse, and the child got quieter, and the Corps' contact team arrived into the middle of the error and recognized it instantly, because the Corps had seen it before, at scale, in the gods. They were administering her, treating the keeper as the instrument her knowledge came through. The smoothing's whole architecture, rebuilt in miniature, out of love, around a 4-year-old, take what the soul carries, lose the soul in the bookkeeping. The correction, and this is the page's gift to the next world, the thing Pell ordered printed, came from the contact team's Verge folk elder, who watched one debriefing, walked out, and returned with the proposal that became the Lear protocol. The keeper does not report. The keeper plays. Every dawn, the same hour the adults had spent extracting her knowledge, the elder sat on the floor of the keeper's house with Pell and played. Boats, blocks, the teddy bear, whose name the atlas dutifully records as the most operationally significant stuffed animal in history, was Mr. Captain. And the play, the elders knew what the strategists didn't, was the report. A 4-year-old does not carry catastrophe as testimony. She carries it as game shapes. The block tower that must be rebuilt the same way each time. The boat that has to reach the rug's edge before the cushion wave comes. Mr. Captain's strict and suddenly elaborate rules about who sleeps where and who keeps watch. And the Corps' analysts, sitting quietly at the room's edge, transcribing 2 years of play, extracted from it the complete almanac of Lear's 11 days. Every spawn pattern, every safe route, every timing, all of it, encoded in games by a mind that had no other archive format, and decodable the moment the adults stopped demanding it arrive in theirs. The strategy that took Lear's tower was assembled. The Corps confirms without embarrassment, substantially from the rules of Mr. Captain. The analyst's annex says it formally. The keeper's knowledge was complete and accurate throughout. The deficiency was never in the witness. It was in our formats. And the climb itself, the Corps did what the New Age does, what Sen taught and the bow lamps practice. They did not send the child up the tower, and they did not leave her below as the asset in the rear. The expedition that took Lear's tower carried her, openly, centrally, in a carry rig the quartermasters built with Mr. Captain's own pocket. Because the keeper's presence, threaded through the party's bond the way tithe once threaded ours, was the grip itself, the thing the floors could not filter, and the chair of Lear, at the top, met the strangest party of the whole New Age, a tower-worn expedition of adults, and a 5-year-old by then, asleep in the rig after the long stairs, and the chair made its offer to the keeper as the architecture required. "You must be so tired. Let me take the weight." And the page records, verbatim, from the bond transcript, what the youngest keeper of any world said to the oldest machine in it, half asleep, with the unanswerable authority of her cohort, the answer her world put on its harbor wall, the shortest refusal in the atlas, and the only one that has ever made me laugh and cry in the same line, which is, of course, her whole species' answer, the grip's answer, the one we grow out of and spend the rest of every life climbing back toward. No, it's mine. Chapter 53. Sela and the Hard Work of Peace. I have made the new world sound like a long, warm meal. And it is, mostly. But I would be lying to you. And I do not lie. The system taught me not to. If I let you think that ending the apocalypse ended all the hardness. It did not. It traded one kind of hardness for another. And the second kind is, in its quiet way, harder. And Sela Ardent is the one who carries it. Because Sela is the one who governs. And governing a world that stays is the least glamorous and most important job there is. Here is the hardness no one warns you about. The gods live among us now. Hundreds of waking administrators, ancient and grief-struck and slowly relearning how to be people, living in the new town beside the mortals they had, a season before, been deleting. And the mortals remember. Of course they remember. There is no smoothing anymore. That was the whole point. Everyone keeps everything now. And so there are people in the town who sit at the long table across from the gray, no longer gray hands that reached for their children on the last night, and they are asked, by the rule of the hill, to eat with them. Nobody outside the wall. Even the gods, especially the gods. It is the rule, and it is right, and it is agony. And Sela Ardent is the one who has to make it work. Meal after meal, day after day, holding a peace that no one fully feels yet between the saved and the ones who almost unmade them.
It would be so much easier.
She told me once, late, in the town hall, after a day spent mediating between a mother whose son the apocalypse had nearly taken, and the waking god who had nearly taken him, both of them weeping, neither of them wrong.
To just put them outside the wall. The gods. After everything, people would understand. People would thank me. It's the popular thing, Eli. You have no idea. Half the town would build the second wall tomorrow, the one that keeps the gods out, and call it justice, and sleep better.
She rubbed her face.
And it would be the warlord. That's the thing I can never explain to them. The second wall, the one that keeps out the ones who hurt us. That's the water tower. That's me rationing by loyalty. That's everything I swore on floor 6 I'd burn a city down before I did again. The easy righteous wall that keeps out the deserving. That's the cold way wearing a coat of justice. And I can feel how badly I want it. Every single day. And wanting it is exactly why I can't have it.
This is the hard work of peace, and it is Sela's. And I want it in the book because the atlas pages and the warm meals and the saved worlds are true, but they are not the whole truth. And the whole truth is that someone has to do the daily grinding, unglamorous labor of actually carrying out the soft way, when the soft way is the harder choice. And that labor falls, as it always falls, on the most competent and least thanked person in the room, which is, as it has always been, Sela Ardent. She does it. That is the triumph, and it is quieter than any battle, and worth more than all of them. She does the hard work of peace, day after day, and she does it the way she does everything, by seeing the whole board and telling each person the one thing they can't see for themselves. She tells the grieving mother, "You are allowed to hate him. The rule is not that you have to forgive. The rule is that you have to eat at the same table. Hatred can sit at a table. Forgiveness might come, someday, across 1,000 shared meals, or it might never come. And either way, you keep your seat and he keeps his. And that is not me asking you to feel something you don't. That is me asking you to stay in the room long enough that something true has a chance to happen. Nobody outside the wall doesn't mean everybody loves everybody. It means everybody stays in the room. The staying is the whole thing. The feelings are your own business." And she tells the waking God, "You do not get to be forgiven on your schedule. You do not get to apologize and have it received. You reached for her son. That happened, and it is kept, and you have to sit across from her hatred for as long as it takes, and you do not get to ask her to make it easier for you. Because making it easier for you is exactly the kind of cost that the old way put on the weak. And we do not do that anymore. You carry the discomfort of being hated by someone you wronged. That is your penance, the same as the warden's. You stay in the room, and you let yourself be hated, and you do not flinch, and you do not leave, and you do not ask for relief. And maybe, across 1,000 meals, you earn something. Or maybe you don't. Either way you stay. The staying is your whole job now. That is governance, in the new world. Not laws, mostly. Not force. Never. Just one competent, furious woman making sure, meal after meal, that everyone stays in the room, that the saved and the gods and the difficult and the grieving all keep their seats at a table too uncomfortable to sit at and too important to leave. Because the staying is the soft way's actual mechanism, the thing under the warmth, the hard, ungentle engine of the gentle world.
You know what I figured out?
Sela said, that late night in the hall.
The soft way isn't soft. That's the joke. Everybody hears, everybody eats, nobody outside the wall, and they think it means easy. They think it means nice. It's the hardest thing there is. The cold way is easy. You just spend the people you don't like, you put the difficult ones outside the wall, you ration by loyalty, you let the easy, righteous arithmetic make your choices for you. That's soft. That's the soft option, the lazy one, the one that lets you off.
Her eyes were fierce and exhausted and entirely herself.
The hard way is staying in the room with the people who hurt you. The hard way is feeding the God who reached for your kid. The hard way is learning the difficult one's name for the 1,000th time. We called it the soft way, and we were wrong. It's the hardest way there is. It's just the hardest way that's also right. And somebody has to do the daily work of holding everyone to it, and that somebody is me. And I would not trade it for any throne in any of the 406 worlds.
She almost smiled.
Turns out the warlord and the peacemaker were always the same competent woman doing the same hard job. I just finally got to point the competence at something worth it. You did that. You and your stupid card about dinner. You gave me a board worth running. Thank you. Now go home. It's late. And tell Maya I said the new emissary roster is on her desk, and I need it back by morning.
I went home. I told Maya. The roster was on the desk by morning, and the town stayed in the room, one hard meal at a time, held there by a woman who had learned, across 64 loops she couldn't remember and one she could, that the bravest thing a leader ever does is not the stand on the wall, but the refusal to build the second one. Interlude. A day at the tail of the queue. The tail of the queue desk occupies the smallest office in the town hall. Sela insisted on the smallest.
The moment this function gets a big room, it's become the thing it hunts.
And for the benefit of the saved worlds, who have all copied the institution, and of the readers of this book, who may live on worlds that need it, I spent a working day there in my 79th year, with a notebook, doing the thing I do, which is writing down what people think is too ordinary to record. Maya's pencil approved the chapter unread.
The big chapters are the why. This one's the how. Books that skip the how get admired and not used.
The desk's standing question, Sela's question, drafted in the first true winter, painted on the wall above the office door, at the insistence of all souls, the warden, is 6 words. Who is the measurement not seeing? And the day's work, hour by hour, looked like this. 7:40. The desk holder that year was a woman named Imra. Sela trains her successors personally and retires them mandatorily after 4 years.
Because the desk teaches you to see the unseen. And year 5 is when you start being proud of it. And pride in seeing is the first blindness.
And Imra's morning began not with the queue but with the ledgers. Every metric the town keeps came across that desk weekly. School attendance, hearthfire meal counts, the festival rosters, the library lendings, the emissary applications. Imra read them the way Sela taught, not for what they said, but for who they were incapable of mentioning.
A measurement is a lamp,
She told me, working.
Everyone reads by it. My job is to sit in the dark behind it and take attendance. Meal counts count attendees. So, who'd be shamed by attending? Who self-rations because the rule says everybody eats, and they've privately decided they're not part of everybody? The rule has no outside, but a person can build their own outside and carry it around with them. Most do, somewhere, in some corner of themselves. The desk exists because walls can be interior.
9:15. The morning's first case. Brought by a school runner. A child. I will give no identifying detail. Desk cases are sealed for a generation. These composites are approved. Whose festival attendance was perfect. Whose meal attendance was perfect. Whose name, a teacher had noticed, never appeared in the games the children organized themselves. Perfect attendance at everything organized by adults. Absent from everything organized by love. The old world would have called that thriving, Imra said, filing the case open. Every lamp we've got shines on that kid and says fine. That's a Merrick pattern. That's exactly the shape of a Merrick. Merrick, the man lost on the hill at 2342, the one whose surname nobody knew, the desk's founding ghost. His name is the office's word for its quarry. We are hunting Merricks. The grimmest, kindest jargon in the New World. The response, drafted by 940, was not an intervention. The desk almost never intervenes directly. You cannot fix unseenness by officially noticing someone. That's a clipboard wearing a kind face. The response was a job. The child in question received, through channels 3 layers removed from the desk, an invitation to apprentice with the bell ringers. A post that comes, structurally, invisibly, by 100-year-old design that is actually 8 years old, with 2 older teenagers whose own desk files closed years ago and who know, without ever being told they are doing it, exactly what they are doing. 11 o'clock. The weekly hardest hour, marked in the diary as God's. The waking administrators integrated a generation ago. Most are woven into the town's fabric, and a fragile, stubborn remainder are the desk's permanent caseload, the ones whose penance never finishes from the inside, who attend, who serve, who are seen by every lamp the town owns, and who have built the interior outside and live there. The file Imra worked that morning was a god 7 years into refusing, with perfect courtesy, every invitation extended on the grounds, never stated, infinitely legible, that the people extending it would retract it if they truly understood the case history. The Khan Atu hunts, Imra said, self-exile. The mark who can never leave the room. With the gods, the desk's whole art is patience at their timescale. You cannot outwait a being who has practiced solitude for an age, but you don't have to. You only have to make sure that every single time the door of their interior outside opens a crack, someone happens to be passing. 7 years we have arranged passers-by. The file stays open. The file stays open for 100 years if it has to. That's the actual institution, you know. Not the desk. The open file. The old world closed files. The whole cold way, every world's version, is at bottom just the practice of closing files on people. We had to invent a bureaucracy that cannot close a file except in one direction, and then guard it from its own efficiency forever. 1430. The audit. Once a week, the desk audits itself. The measurement that watches the measurements gets watched in turn. Sela's design is fractal because her suspicion of herself is fractal. And the auditor is, by charter, drawn from the desk's own former caseload. The week I visited, the auditor was an old man who had been, decades before, the town's most spectacular Merrick. The case file, his own, declassified by his own hand, which is the only declassification the charter allows, that he spread on the desk as a teaching document, showed 11 years of perfect attendance and total interior exile, closed at last, not by any stratagem, but by, he tapped the line in the file, the closing entry in Sela's own hand. Subject caught the desk arranging passers-by. Subject was furious. Subject demanded to know how long. Subject was shown this file. Subject sat down and read 11 years of the town refusing to close him, and wept, and asked, Verbatim, log it. What do I owe? And was given the only invoice the desk issues. The old man smiled, retired Merrick to working auditor, and recited the invoice from memory. The desk's whole theory of repayment. Sela's purest sentence. Owed. Nothing. Payable anyway. If you insist, become a passerby. 17 o'clock. Last entry of the day, and the one I came for, though I didn't know it until it happened. The desk's final task, daily, every day since founding, takes 4 minutes. Imra opened the oldest ledger in the office, the original, the founding document, in Sela's wartime chalk hand transcribed to ink, and read aloud, to an empty room, per charter, the names. Merrick, Vach, Imti, the lost of the 91 minutes, the lost of the long loop, the unseen, the desk was built too late for. The reading has no audience and needs none. It is not for anyone present. It is the institutional version of the thing this whole book is, the keeping that asks no receipt. And at the end, per charter, the desk holder closes the ledger and answers the question painted over the door, out loud, to nobody, so that the office never once closes for the night believing its work is finishable. Who is the measurement not seeing? Someone. Always someone. See you tomorrow. I walked home down the hill in the dusk, past the lit windows, with my notebook full of the how, and I thought about the boy in the bank whose name I didn't learn for 60 loops, and the 4 behind the glass at the bus shelter, and Marek, and the 7-year god, and I wrote the day's last line on the steps of the farmhouse, where Maya found it and marked it for the chapter's end. The grand version of the soft way fit on a bus roof. Everybody eats, nobody outside the wall. The working version fits on a desk in the smallest office we have, and it is even shorter, and it is the closest thing the new world has to a daily prayer. Keep the file open. Arrange the passers-by. Read the names to the empty room. The Atlas of Saved Worlds, the world that kept its tower running. Every saved world stood its tower down, the floors unmeant, the trials dissolved, the architecture converted to galleries and tables and schools. Every world except one, and the exceptions scandalized the council for a decade, and the page of the world called Joan is in this book because the scandal was wrong and took 10 years to admit it. And the way it was wrong completes something this book has been building since a contractor first looked at a slate and asked who drew the track. June was a games world, not the deck of many hands kind. June's games were physical, festival scale, a culture of mountain townships whose calendar ran on competitions. The climbs, the carries, the great seasonal relays, a civilization that had organized its whole social metabolism around contest, the way Ash of Roses organized around song. And when Joan's war was won, cleanly, mid-wave, keeper and course together, and the moment came to stand the tower down, the keeper of Joan, a relay captain named Odo, stood at the foot of the architecture that had killed climbers on 400 worlds and made the proposal that lit the decade's argument. Don't dissolve it. Re-rig it. Look at this thing. 12 floors of trials. Obstacle architecture beyond anything our festival rites ever dreamed. The finest course ever built. The malice was never in the floors. You've taught us that yourselves. The malice was in the stakes. Death, worthiness, the chair. That's what made it a filter. Strip the stakes, and what's left is, and the Corps liaison reports that the keeper's eyes, at this point in the address, were alight in a way that made the old hands deeply nervous. What's left is the greatest game in the history of the worlds. We're keeping it. We're going to run it. Festival rules, teams, ropes, rescue points. Nobody climbs alone. Everybody who starts gets carried to the finish by somebody if it comes to that. The tower spent 10,000 years asking, are you worthy? We're going to spend 10,000 asking the festival question instead. Are you coming? The council's objection, argued in good faith and at volume, and I argued it myself, and the record should show I did, was that some architectures cannot be redeemed by re-rigging, that a filter played at is still a filter rehearsed, that Joan's children, racing up floors that had murdered 400 world's climbers, would absorb the old grammar through their feet, ranking, gating, the worthy and the slow. We sent observers expecting to document harm. The observers' reports, accumulating across the decade, are what reversed the scandal, and the Hinge report, read at the council session where the objection was formally withdrawn, was filed by an observer who had stationed herself at the re-rigged Floor 3, the old worthy door, to watch what a games culture does with the architecture of exclusion. On June, the worthy door's floor is the relay's famous heart, and the festival rule for it, evolved by the racers themselves within the first years, is this: the door still opens for the worthy, and the teams have decided what worthy means. No runner passes the door until their whole team is at the wall. The fast wait, publicly, ceremonially, at the sigil, waiting at the door has become, on June, the festival's signature image, its equivalent of our hills' lit windows. The strong, standing in the old circle of judgment, cheering back down the course, and the door, reading the assembled team, opens for the slowest member first. By rule, the slowest crosses the threshold of the worthy first, to the loudest noise the mountain townships know how to make, and the observer's report closes with the sentence that ended the council's decade of objection. We worried Joan's children would learn the old grammar from the architecture. Verified instead, the architecture is learning the new grammar from the children. The door has not been re-meant by any hearthright. We checked. No intervention on record, and it now opens slowest first of its own accord, on a floor whose original specification ranked by power. The stone has been retrained by 30 years of festivals, the way the home stairs were retrained by pilgrims. Conclusion: submitted with the observer's apologies to her own prior position. There are two ways to unmake a cruel architecture: dissolve it or out-practice it. Joan chose the second, and the second may be the deeper unmaking, because a dissolved filter is gone, but an out-practiced one is converted, and stands there, forever, as proof on the skyline, the same stones, the same floors. Look what they do now. Nothing built is beyond re-rigging. Signed, with a request for reassignment to somewhere less likely to keep making the observer cry at sporting events. I climbed Joan's tower myself, in my last traveling years, festival-rigged, roped to a team of strangers who did not stay strangers past Floor 2, which is, of course, on Joan, the whole point of Floor 2, and I was, at the relay's end, the slowest member of my team, old and stick-legged, and so it was me the worthy door opened for first, to the roar of a mountain township, while my team cheered behind me, and I stood on the sigil where the wall had once read me: power, laughable, victories, 0, unworthy, and the door of the worthy swung wide slowest first. And I want the record of the atlas and the record of this book to hold what the keeper of Joan said, walking me through it, his hand under my elbow, because it is the last word on the oldest architecture, and the games world earned it. Feel that? That's the same stone, keeper. Same door that turned away 400 worlds. We didn't forgive it, and we didn't destroy it. We just gave it 30 years of better examples, every festival, every season, until the only worthiness it had ever seen with its own eyes was waiting at the wall and carrying each other through. Stones learn from what crosses them. So do children. So did we all. He grinned the relay captain's grin. At the door, at the roaring crowd, at the slowest runner across the threshold first. Turns out you don't have to win an argument with a door. You just have to walk through it right, enough times, with enough people. Then it's a gate. Interlude. The handing of the slate. Sela Ardent retired. Formally, completely, in writing, with a succession plan she had been drafting, by her own admission, for 19 years. In the 51st year of the world that stayed. And the ceremony she permitted was characteristic. No feast, no speeches.
One agenda item, properly minuted.
At an ordinary session of the council, between a granary report and a crossing schedule. The minutes of that item run 2 pages. The town has never stopped talking about them. They are reproduced here in part. with the testimony of those present, because the handing of the slate is the new age's only complete demonstration of the thing every institution claims and almost none achieves: the founder who actually leaves. She brought the slate. The slate. The wartime original. The 91 minutes log. The artifact under glass that the library lends back to her by standing arrangement one day a year, and she stood at the long table where she had run the operations of 3 generations, and she said, per the minutes,
Item: Succession of the Quartermaster's Office, the Tale of the Q Desk's Charter Authority, and associated functions. I have held some version of this post for 51 years. I am the last founder in active office. The others had the sense to hand off decades ago. Hollis to the 41, Maya to the school, the keeper to the book. And I have watched their handings and taken notes, because I take notes. And my notes say the founders who leave well share one behavior. They leave while they are still good. Not after the decline. The decline is visible to everyone but the declining. While they are still good, and still beloved, and still, this is the hard one, still better at the job than their successor. Because that is the actual test of an institution, colleagues. Not whether it survives the founder's death. Whether it survives the founder's competence. Whether the thing can be handed over while every soul in the room knows the old hands were steadier, and hold anyway, because the institution was never supposed to be a person, and the only way to prove it isn't, is to subtract the person, while she could still win the argument for staying.
She set the slate on the table.
I could still win the argument. Minute that. It's the whole reason today is the right day.
The successor, the 4th desk holder, Imra, the one I shadowed for the chapter on the smallest office, grown into the town's finest quiet instrument, stood to receive the charter, and the minutes record that Sela handed her not the slate, but a new one, blank, ordinary, slate-grade chalk included, with the explanation that has already entered the training of 3 worlds.
The old slate goes back under glass. It's a relic. Relics are for keeping, not for steering. You get a blank one, because the post is not the record of my operations. The post is the standing question, and the question writes fresh on every shift. You know the question.
And Imra, per the minutes, answered the question, who is the measurement not seeing? And Sela Ardent said the last official sentence of a 51-year command, the one the town quotes at every handover of anything, from council seats to bakery counters.
Correct. And as of this minute, officer, the answer includes me. I'm off the rolls, and outside every metric I built. Old woman, no post, no production, perfect attendance at nothing. I am, by the instruments of this office, invisible, which means I am finally qualified to audit them from the far side, which I will do, with relish, from a bench, at sundown, unpaid and unstoppable. The desk has its first volunteer, Merrick. Try and see me. That's not a farewell, colleagues. That's a standing inspection. Item closed. What's next on the docket? The crossing schedule? Good. I'll stay for that one. As a guest.
The minutes record. In the recorder's hand, the founder then sat in the gallery, in the public seats, for the first time in 51 years. The council conducted the crossing schedule under observation. It has never conducted an item more carefully. The system works. But the part of the handing the town actually tells, the part the minutes could not capture, attested instead by the dozen souls who lingered, came after adjournment, in the emptying hall, when Imra, the new holder of everything, was seen to approach the old quartermaster with the question visible on her before she asked it, the question every successor of every founder carries. What if I'm not? What if I can't? And Sela Ardent, who had audited every soul on the hill for half a century and was not going to stop in the doorway, cut it off before it cost the asking.
You won't be as good as me for 10 years, maybe ever. I told the whole council as much. It's minuted. The comparing is over. You lost. Congratulations. Now notice what the institution did about it. It handed you the charter anyway, in public, with the old hands still steady, because the post never needed the best operator. It needed the question kept open. You will keep it open differently than I did. Softer, probably. You're a softer instrument. I've read your file since you were the watchful kind at a school gate. And some of the difference will be worse than me. And some of it, officer, will be better. And neither of us will ever be able to tell which is which, because the post's results take a generation to land. That's the actual handing, so receive it properly. I am not giving you my competence. Competence dies with the operator. That's its nature. Mine goes to the bench with me. I am giving you the thing that was handed to me, on a hill, by a man with a notebook, 60-some years ago, the only transferable asset there ever was.
And the witnesses agree she put the chalk in the younger woman's hand and closed the fingers over it, the old gesture, the gesture of glasses and keepsakes, and everything this civilization has ever passed from hand to hand, and named the asset.
The refusal to look away. That's the whole inheritance. Everything else is technique. And technique, you'll grow your own of, watching what you refuse to look away from. Now go open tomorrow's file. The measurement is already not seeing somebody. Tonight, on your watch. Always is. Go. And officer.
The last word. From the doorway, the founder leaving well, leaving complete, leaving on the one sentence 51 years had earned her.
It was the best post in all the worlds. Nobody ever tells the successors that part. It's the best post. Everything in this town that looks like governance was only ever love, doing paperwork. Enjoy the paperwork. I did. Every page.
Chapter 54. The Cartographer's Own Country. I have told you a great deal about Wren, the one administrator who refused the smoothing, the cartographer who drew homes around every citadel, the god who guided me up the last flight and put a second chair in the smoothing room. But I have not told you her own story, the grief that made her draw the homes, and she gave it to me at last in the third spring of the new world, in the home for the dead, in her own gallery, and a keeper of the dead does not leave a grief untold once it has been entrusted to him. Wren's world was called Marrow, and it was a world of map-makers. That is a strange thing for a world to be known for, but Marrow was a vast and broken country, mountains and chasms and drifting fog-bound seas, a world so hard to cross that the highest art of its civilization was the map, and Wren had been, before the hunger came, the greatest cartographer of her age, a woman who had spent her life walking into the unmapped dark and coming back with the dark made legible, made crossable, made home, because that is what a map is, in the end, a way of turning the terrifying unknown into a place where people can live. And when the hunger came for Marrow, Wren did the things she knew how to do. She mapped the apocalypse. She walked into the dark of the ending world, loop after loop, Marrow's keeper of the dead, the one who remembered, and she came back each time, with a little more of the catastrophe made legible, the monsters charted, the safe routes drawn, the tower's floors mapped, exactly as I had done with my notebook, because the keepers of the dead are all, at bottom, the same person doing the same thing on different worlds, turning the terror into a map so that the people behind them can cross it alive. She got further than almost anyone. She mapped her whole world's tower. She reached the top.
And I had a map of everything.
Wren told me, in her gallery, her lost world of mountains and fog-bound seas, glowing gently around us in the conserved light.
Every floor, every monster, every safe route. I had made the entire apocalypse legible, the way I'd made everything legible my whole life. And I climbed to the top with my maps, certain, Eli, the way only a mapmaker can be certain, that if I could just chart the last room, the smoothing room, I would find the route through it, the safe passage, the way to save my world. Because that was who I was, the woman who maps the dark so the people can cross it. I had never met a darkness I couldn't map.
She paused, in the gentle light of Marrow.
And then I reached the top, and I met the warden, and I understood that the smoothing room could not be mapped. Because it wasn't a place. It was a choice. Sit in the chair and forget, or refuse and remember alone. And a choice is the one terrain a map is useless on. There's no safe route through a choice. There's just the choice. And I, the greatest cartographer of my age, the woman who had made a life out of finding the way through, stood in the one room, in all the worlds, where there was no way through, only a way into forgetting, or into a loneliness so total it had broken everyone who chose it.
Her gray eyes were wet.
I refused. I kept my dead. I would not let them be smoothed away. My world, my mountains, my fog-bound seas, the people I'd mapped 1,000 safe routes for, and still could not save. I refused the chair. And it was the right choice. And it was the loneliest choice. And it cost me everything Marrow ever was. Because I kept the grief of my world, but I could not keep the world. It ended. It's a gallery now. My whole beloved, unmappable country, reduced to conserved light. And I became a god who remembered. Alone. For an age, the one who couldn't be smoothed, and couldn't go home, and couldn't find the route through. Because there wasn't one. Because some darknesses you don't map, you just sit down in.
So why the homes? I asked her. On the maps. You draw little homes around every citadel. You've done it for an age. Why? And Ren the cartographer, the greatest mapmaker of the world called Marrow, told me the thing that I think is the deepest secret of her long, sad faithfulness. The thing that kept her from asking to be smoothed across all the lonely centuries when Vess and so many others gave up.
Because a citadel is a place you defend.
She said.
And a home is a place you live. And I spent my whole life, and my whole afterlife, learning that the difference between them is the only thing that matters. The old gods mapped the worlds as citadels, fortresses, towers, things to be held against the dark. And I kept drawing the homes, in the margins, around the edges, because I couldn't stop believing, even alone, even for an age, even with my own world reduced to light, that the point of crossing the dark was never to reach a fortress, it was to reach a home. A place you live, a place with a table, a place where the crossing ends and the living begins.
She looked at me.
I drew the homes because I was waiting for someone to climb up out of the dark, who understood that the map was never the point, that all my life's work, all those routes, through all that terror, were only ever in service of getting people home. And then you came. With a town on a hill, and a card about dinner, and a whole we, and you didn't ask me for a map of how to win. You asked me how to get everyone home.
Her voice broke, gently, in the light of Marrow.
Do you know what that was like, Eli? After an age of drawing homes in the margins that no one ever read? To finally meet someone who had come all that way through all that dark for the home, and not for the fortress? I had been the only one who believed the homes were the point. And then there were two of us. And then there was a whole town. And then there was a council, and an atlas, and 100 saved worlds, all of them built around the thing I'd been drawing alone, in the margins for longer than your species has had maps.
She wiped her face.
I didn't save Marrow. I couldn't find the route. There wasn't one. My world is light now. But every home in the new age, every table, every second chair, they're all drawn from my margins. Marrow died, but its cartography lives in every world we save. I turned out to be mapping the right country all along. I was just an age too early, and I had to wait, alone, in the margins, for the rest of the universe to learn to read the homes.
I sat with Ren in the gallery of Marrow, her lost world of mapmakers glowing around us, and I did the only thing there was to do, the only thing the whole book has ever been about. I asked her to tell me about her mountains, her fog-bound seas, the people she'd mapped 1,000 safe routes for and couldn't save, their names. And she told me. It took a long time. We have nothing but time now. And when she finished, Marrow was a little less lost, because it was in one more place, in me, kept, shared, the way grief is meant to be carried, and the greatest cartographer of a dead world had, at last, after an age of waiting in the margins, someone to read her homes. That is what I am for. That is what a keeper of the dead is for, even one who forgot his own dead, and learns the rest second-hand. We read the homes in each other's margins. We ask about the mountains. We make the lost a little less lost by being one more place it is kept. It is not much. It is everything. It is the only map that was ever worth drawing, and Wren drew it, alone, in the margins, for an age, and now the whole universe reads it, and her mountains are crossed at last, not to a fortress, never to a fortress, but home. Chapter 55. The Atlas of Saved Worlds. The Laughing World. The Atlas is not all grief, and I would be giving you a false account of the New Age if I left you with the impression that saving worlds is solemn work. Most of it, day to day, is funny, in the way that being alive among other people is funny. And there is one page of the Atlas that the whole council reads aloud at the midwinter feast every year, because it makes everyone laugh until they cry. And I give it to you now as a mercy, because you have climbed a long way through a heavy book and you have earned a lighter floor. The emissaries called it the Laughing World, eventually, though that was not its first name. Its first name, in the early reports, was The World That Will Not Take This Seriously, and it was filed by an exasperated emissary named Pock, one of Dub's nation, young, earnest, easily flustered, who had been sent to deliver the gravest news in the universe to a world that responded to the end of all things by making jokes about it. The Laughing World's keeper of the dead was a man named Reggie, who, upon dying and waking at the same dawn for the first time, had reportedly looked at the blue system box hanging in the air and said, "Oh, fantastic. Tutorial's broken. Has anyone got the patch notes?" And upon dying and waking a second time had said, "Right, well, at least the respawn point's convenient." And upon meeting the emissary Pock, a goblin elder bearing the distilled tragic wisdom of 406 ended worlds, had taken one look at the small green creature, solemnly preparing to deliver the most important speech in cosmic history, and said, "Brilliant. The DLC's got companions now. Are you a healer or a tank? Please be a healer. I'm rubbish at staying alive, as you may have noticed." Pock's reports back to the council grew increasingly desperate. The keeper will not accept the gravity of the situation. I explained the hunger, and he asked if it had good loot. I explained the smoothing, and he said it sounded like a great way to skip the grind. I explained the 406 worlds, and he observed that we were really bad at this game, and offered to help us get good. I do not know how to save a world that keeps trying to high-five me. And the council, reading Pock's reports at the long table, did a thing that I think is the truest sign of how far we had come from the cold and solemn gods of the old way. We laughed, and then we sent more emissaries, not to make Reggie serious, to get the joke. Because here is what the Laughing World taught us, and it is a real lesson, under the comedy, the way the best comedy always has a real lesson under it. Reggie was not in denial. That was Pock's mistake, and the council's near mistake, and it is a mistake the solemn make about the funny in every world there is. The emissaries assumed that a man who joked about the apocalypse had not grasped it, but Reggie had grasped it completely. He had died and woken hundreds of times. He understood the stakes precisely. He had simply decided, with full knowledge, that he was going to face the end of all things laughing, because laughing was how his people had always faced the dark, and it was not weakness, and it was not denial, it was courage in the dialect of his world. And once the emissaries stopped trying to make him solemn and started laughing with him, they discovered that Reggie's way was, for his world, the soft way. That the Laughing World did not need to be taught the card about dinner, because the Laughing World already knew the deepest secret of the card about dinner, which is that you survive the unbearable by refusing to let it make you grim. Reggie's jokes were not a failure to take the apocalypse seriously. They were a technology for surviving it. a way of holding the terror at exactly the distance where you could still function, still help your neighbor, still keep your forge lit. Because a person laughing is a person who has not yet been conquered, and a world laughing together is a world the hunger cannot make despair. And despair was always the hunger's true weapon, the grief turned inward, the giving up. The laughing world saved itself, mostly, and the emissaries just made sure it wasn't laughing alone. Reggie climbed his tower cracking jokes the whole way, and his party climbed with him cracking jokes back. And they reached the top, and Reggie looked at the chair and the warden equivalent of his world and said, "Let me guess. Sit down. You've done so well. You must be so tired. I'll take the weight? Mate, I've seen this quest before. It's a trap. The reward's rubbish and you lose all your memories. Hard pass. Got any side quests that don't involve cosmic lobotomy?" And the smoothing of the laughing world, faced with a keeper who refused it while laughing, who would not even grant it the dignity of a solemn refusal, simply could not function, because the smoothing ran on the gravity of the moment, on the tired hero's grateful surrender. And you cannot smooth a man who is treating the most important choice in the universe like a tutorial boss with bad drops. Reggie sits on the council now. He is, officially, the council's worst member. He is late to everything. He calls the atlas the patch notes. He refers to the warden as the final boss who joined your party. And he once introduced the entire grave history of the smoothing to a newly saved world as, so basically the universe had a really bad mental health policy, and we fixed it. He is also, unofficially, the most beloved member, because Reggie is the one who reminds us, every single meeting, with every terrible joke, that the soft way is not solemn, that we did not save 406 worlds in order to be grim about it, that the whole point of ending the apocalypse was so that people could get back to the serious business of being delightfully, irreverently, unconquerably alive. "You lot," Reggie said once, at a council meeting that had gotten too heavy, too freighted with the weight of all those galleries and all that grief, "are forgetting the most important thing, which is that we won. We won. The good guys won. The dark got a hug and a sandwich and stopped being a problem. And everyone gets to keep their dead, and there's a 400-foot table, and an infinite supply of worlds full of people who get to be alive now. And you're all sitting around with faces like a funeral. This isn't a funeral. We ended the funerals. So somebody pass the good wine, and let's drink to the boy who can't even remember saving us all." He raised a glass to me, and his eyes, under the comedy, were suddenly and briefly and entirely sincere. The soft, daft, beautiful man who forgot his own name so the rest of us could keep ours. To Eli Vance, who proved that the universe is, in the end, exactly as kind as we're stubborn enough to make it. Now drink, you miserable saints. We won, and the dead are at the table, and that is the best joke and the best truth there has ever been, that it turns out the punchline to 406 tragedies was a dinner party. We drank, we laughed, we cried, a little, the good kind, and the dead, kept and named and carried, were at the table, the way they are at every table now, forever, laughing along, because that, too, is keeping. You don't only keep the dead by grieving them, you keep them by laughing the way they taught you, by setting their place and telling their jokes and refusing, absolutely refusing, to let the dark have the last word, when the last word could be a punchline instead. The laughing world is my favorite page of the atlas. I think it's everyone's. Reggie would be unbearable if he knew. He absolutely knows. The Atlas of Saved Worlds. The world that saved us back. The page I am about to give you is the only one in the atlas filed in both directions. The only world whose entry reads, "Saved by us" on one line and "Saved us" on the next. And the council debated its classification for a season before Reggie, of all people, solved the taxonomy in one sentence. File it under friendship, you absolute clerks. That's what it's called when the rescuing goes both ways and nobody's keeping score. And so the world called Ven is filed, uniquely, under F. And here is how the saved worlds learned that the soft way's current flows in both directions, or it isn't flowing at all. Ven was a late-wave world, reached in good time, saved cleanly, a world of weavers and great slow rivers. Its keeper a bargewoman of formidable calm, tower opened in under 100 resets. The standard New Age miracle, if the word standard can hold such a thing. The emissaries moved on. Ven joined the council, sent its own emissaries outward, took its place in the bonfire. 12 years passed. And then Ven's delegation arrived at our world's midwinter. This was the 31st year, the year after I began this book, and asked, through channels, with enormous tact, for a private session with the council, and the bargewoman keeper of Ven, older now, stood up in the small chamber and said the thing no saved world had ever said to the world that started the bonfire. We have come to make a report, and we have rehearsed it, the whole river of the way here, because it is not our place, and we are going to say it anyway, because your own charter instructs us to. Law 3 says we come. It does not say downhill only. She unrolled her delegation's gift, a woven thing, a great river chart of the saved worlds, the bonfire rendered in thread, world after world after world, and she laid her boatwoman's hand flat in its center, on our world, on the first flame, and she said, "Your world taught the rest of us to watch for the ones the measurement does not see. We have been watching, and the one the measurement does not see, friends, the one with perfect attendance at everything organized by duty and absent from everything organized by rest, is you. The hub world, the founder's world. Every saved world sends its hardest cases here, its constitutional crises, its mercy movements, its questions about clockwork souls. Every new keeper is trained here. Every midwinter the whole stack of worlds looks here for the litany said rightly. You have made yourselves the keepers of the keepers, and you have been doing it for 31 years, and we ran your own desk's diagnostics on you, from outside, the way your charter teaches, and we are here to deliver the finding." She let the silence do its work. She was a keeper. Keepers know the weight of a pause. You are the Merrick of the worlds, magnificently attended, completely unheld. Who keeps you? And before anyone answers, our delegation has been instructed to note that every soul in this chamber just glanced at the same 3 elders, all of whom are in this book your librarians keep, all of whom are past 80, and that glance was the finding confirmed. I was one of the 3 glanced at. I will not pretend otherwise. This chapter is filed under F, and friendship runs on the truth. And I will report what it was like to sit in that chamber. An old man with a book half written about how nobody anywhere should ever again be the only place anything is kept, and be shown, by a bargewoman from a world I had never visited, reading our own instruments back to us, that we had rebuilt the keeper's solitude at planetary scale and called it responsibility. The hub world, the founder's world, the world that taught the universe to share the carrying, had quietly accepted itself, the way every strong carrier accepts itself, the way I had accepted myself for 64 loops. I'll hold it. I held it before. Holding it is what we're for. And the worlds we saved had needed 12 years, and our own charter to work up the nerve to stage what the Atlas now calls, formally, in the driest filing language ever applied to an act of love, the upstream intervention. What Ven proposed, and the council, after the season's debate that the mercy movement had taught us to have out loud, accepted, became the institution the saved worlds call the return current, and it works exactly the way the river chart drew it. The carrying flows back. The hub world's hardest files are heard, now, by panels drawn from the youngest saved worlds, on the stated principle, Ven's principle, that the founder's grief should be held by hands that did not learn holding from the founders, so that the holding arrives genuinely from outside, the way Set arrived in the ash, the way the emissaries arrive at every beginning dark. Our midwinter litany is led, now, each year, by a visiting world. They rotate. They rehearse all year, the year the lonely deep's grown children led it. The whole hill wept by the second response. And the 3 glanced-at elders were assigned. There is no other verb. Sela laughed until she had to sit down. Passers-by, keepers from other worlds, on rotation, with no duties on our world at all, except the one the desk invented in its smallest office, the one we had prescribed for everyone but ourselves. Someone who happens to be passing. Someone at the door of the interior outside, whenever it opens a crack. Mine was, for the first rotation, the barge woman herself. She came up the hill to the farmhouse twice a week for a year, on no schedule I could anticipate, and sat with me and Maya, and talked rivers, and asked nothing, and audited nothing, and one evening in the spring she looked at the manuscript of this book stacked on the table, 600 pages by then, The Keeping of Everything, The Last Wall, and she said the sentence that I have decided is the final lesson of the whole atlas, the one Ven crossed the dark to teach the teachers. Your book is beautiful, Keeper, and I notice it does the thing you all do. Every page holds someone, hundreds of pages, hundreds of held souls, your goblin, your gods, your dead, your heirs. And nowhere in it, I am told, is there a page where you are the one held, and someone else does the keeping, except as gratitude, which doesn't count, because gratitude is just holding with the bill showing. She tapped the stack, gently, a boatwoman testing a hull. So here is Ven's freight, delivered. When you write the chapter about us, and you will, you file everything, it's your whole lovely sickness, right into it, in your own hand, on the record, where your heirs and all the worlds can read it, the sentence you have spent 90 years and 2 forgettings making sure you would never have to say. Say you need keeping too, not as a teaching, not as an example for others. Just say it, plainly, the way your warden taught the children. Out loud, badly, in the wrong words. The whole rest of the book is the proof that it works. Go on. We came a long way. The river doesn't flow one direction, old man. Nothing alive does. So, here it is then, in my own hand, on the record, the freight of Ven, the hardest sentence in 800 pages, and the truest, and I am embarrassed by it exactly as much as Maya predicted, and it stays in anyway, because the pencil rules, and the river is right. I need keeping too. I always did. The whole time. Every loop. There. Filed under F.